Welcome to Darkest Dungeon 2. This is a boss guide for the 4 region bosses for the Feta, the Tangle, the Sprawl and the Shroud. So you should be well prepared to take on any of these with basically the standard team. No special teams needed. So just some special tricks. So let's dive in and take a look at the first one. The first boss we're going to take a look at is the Harvest Child in the Fetter. So this is disgusting creature.
Born to a corpulent, half-eaten mother, the child is a ravenous avatar of degeneracy.
Alright, so the trick with this fight is that these putrid meat in front, they will cast a debuff, so consider debuff resist if possible. And they at the start of the turn, if you're affected by a debuff, you'll take a step forward. And if you are in the first position, you will lose your turn and instead munch on this disgusting meat. In the same time, the Harvest Child will have 2 turns per round and move forward. If it's in the first round, then it'll do a Maw of Life, which deals a lot of damage to the first 2 ranks. So consider pushback. It's actually quite easy to push back, and we have to manage quite well the putrid meat. So if you can, then move them around. If they're in the first or the second position, they will lose their turn and get into first position. So luckily here, we did not get any of the debuff. If you kill the meat, then you don't get the debuff. But on the other hand, the disadvantage of that is the fact that you will then have to deal with the fact that it will now do the Maws of Life more often, because there are fewer places where it shuffles. When it comes forward, it does Maws of Life and goes to the back of the line. So here we have the Harvest Hunger, and that is not really a big problem in position 3, but it will mean that your team is very susceptible to shuffles. So if you have someone who's problem with shuffle, if you can also do something to lock them in place, then that is quite advantageous. If you can also lock the enemy in place, you can lock the Harvest Child in the back position, and then it'll be much easier to hit, and it won't do the Maws of Life. Now it doesn't have an enormous amount of hit points, 120 hit points. It is quite resistant to blight, but not burn and bleed. So you can do that. If in this case we're pretty good in this. So you can see here, our Plague Doctor move forward at the start of the turn, doesn't cost a round. You can also use the Holy Water if you have it for just clearing out those debuffs, or any other way that you can clear debuffs. So the debuff only lasts 1 turn. So after the turn, they'll be free to act as usual. So here comes now the Maw of Life when it comes from the front. In this case, we just have our Vestal, just do some buffs. We want to do more damage. It doesn't really matter what, if it's in first position, the Harvest Child, it can only do Maws of Life. So it doesn't really matter what we do. Divine Comfort, just a little bit of preemptive healing. This part, let's see if anyone gets the buff. Yes, they all both got the buff. That is absolutely disgusting, because that is means that they will both actually be eating and losing their turns, unless we can do something to lock them in place. For example, now I can deal some damage, or I can, if I move it 1 step forward, then the Plague Doctor will step 1 forward to position 2 instead, and then not end up being. So there you go. If it was ended up in turn 1, in location 1, it would be a problem. Now I can use the Holy Water to remove the debuff, and then instead of it being disaster and 2 of them losing their turn, we have to manage to work around it, and then we did not lose any rounds from it, except we just got the same buffs again. So that's quite unfortunate. The good news is we can see that Feed the Hunger, people don't like it. They de-stress a little bit, but they also lose 15% of their max hit points. So you don't want to have this fight going on for too long, because it means that your tank, or whoever is in the front row, mainly the tank, will start taking a lot of damage, or basically not have a lot of hit points, and then Maws of Life will actually do damage. So as always with these kind of fights, you want to make sure that you don't take too long. And now we have again the problem, and here we have the Plague Doctor will now step forward and also lose the turn again, lose 15% hit points, and be in a very miserable position, work its way all the way to the front. Luckily, there isn't a whole lot left of the fight. 16 hit points and both a burn and a bleed running. So you can see that it will kind of strain us as we go here. Let's see. None of those got affected. I think it's like the debuff is maybe like 50% chance of applying, and then you also have a resist on top. So it's not always. Let's get a little bit of heals in, or maybe just a nuke on the boss. With 16 hit points, the Tempting Aroma, this is fine here in the back row. It doesn't really do anything. And the Harvest Child, the other attacks that are not the Maws of Life, they're not that dangerous, but we really don't want it to attack in the Maws of Life. get us there. And if you then do hold the line, then we will be able to go forward and lock ourselves in place, which means that if the Plague Doctor would get the debuff, then it wouldn't be able to push into position 1. So that's also something you can work with if you have that opportunity. And then, of course, as we are here, we just finish up the boss soon. I hope it's not a very difficult boss once you learn to manage it. So immobilize, both for yourself, that debuff resist, debuff clearing, and those are really efficient ways of dealing it. And then you just have the boss taken care of here, and knockback as well. So that is the first boss, and get some pretty good loot from this one as well. As always, you can do it for the loot, for the loathing removal, or for the mastery. The next boss we're going to take a look at is the General. He is hiding in the tangle in his keep.
Locked in a nightmare slumber, he is tortured by failures both real and imagined.
Now this is also a very technical fight. He takes up the first 3 positions, and in the last position there is a root. You can't damage it, you can't apply anything, but you need to hit it anyway. He applies this Tangle Growth, and every turn the root in the back will apply Tangle to 2 enemies, and we need to remove those before they stack to 3. If they stack to 3, they will lose. The character will lose their turn and be in really big trouble. The first round is just a DPS round or a buff round, so get as much damage in as you can. The General has 1 attack per turn. It doesn't do much. Mainly it's kind of these unsettling whispers, that kind of thing, a little bit of stress, a little bit of these things. So that's not the big threat. The big threat is the fact that you don't have a lot of DPS, because you have to every round allocate 2 attacks to the root in the back. So you would like to be in a position where you can use characters that can both affect the back row and something else, so you don't lose an entire action, because at that point you would lose 2 characters entirely. So you really want to make sure that you have some good DPS on the boss, but someone else to hit the back row twice a turn. You can see that the rank 2 and 4, they have been applied 2 of those tangles. If they get to 3, then they lose their turn. That's really bad. So we're going to keep our Highwayman for our constant DPS. Then here we have an option. We can either do Magnesium Rain, or we can do the Blind. Those will affect the back row. You can also use combat items. Just note that when you do a combat item on the root, it doesn't trigger immediately, but it will trigger at the end of the turn. So here we now have to sort of figure out every turn who will be allocated to tapping the root in the back. We still need 1 more turn back there. We want to get the buffs up, so I don't want my Vestal to do this, but we have the option of doing Bellow, for example, is an option. We can do Bellow at the back, which will also hit. You don't need to deal damage, you just need to hit it with something. And then that is the 2 rounds or 2 attacks per round that we can do. So now comes the next feature here, is the Soil Stirrers. That's a big attack that will be sort of telegraphed on these 2 positions. Pretty good. Luckily we have buffed, we have dodge tokens, we have the super block tokens, we got a lot of things going on. Now I'm going to do Blinding Gas. That will also trigger. Blinding Gas is on 1-time cooldown. Magnesium Rain is on a 1-turn cooldown, so both of those can be alternated. So we can sort of have our Plague Doctor allocated to just do this. Now here's the issue with the Bellow is also on a 1-turn cooldown, so that can only be done every other turn. That means the other turns I will need to have someone, either the Man-at-Arms or the Vestal, take care of the last route here. So there's a still route on the Highwayman, and we need to do it. So basically, since we have a Conviction 3 on the Vestal, I'm going to sacrifice, and we don't have a crit token on the Man-at-Arms, the Highwayman, then we are going to sacrifice a pistol shot, likely to write some damage. So you can see that the fight is not particularly dangerous. The danger is the fact that it's much longer than you'd think, because you have so much of your DPS or so much of your resources actions are allocated to the route in the back. I cannot recommend allowing it to sort of scale up. I think we got an extra turn here. That's from something, so that's why we have an extra turn here and got an extra little DPS inbound here. Yeah, so I would not recommend sort of gambling and just hoping that you can manage it, because they will lose their turn and they will stress everyone else out. So if you don't take care of the tap route every turn, get it down to 0 at the end of every turn, you're just really putting luck, gambling with luck, and that's not how you want to play Darkest Dungeon 2, right? Now we have to allocate someone. We still have 2 actions left, so that can be... I don't think that's the smartest to head here, because I could use those actions. I think it's because I wanted to get the taunt up on the front liner. So the growth recedes, and then I will... And the soil stirs again. So you can see that it's adding up. Now here, I will use the DPS, or we'll do the Magnesium Rain. Yeah, let's do the Magnesium Rain. And then we have the tank freed up. We have removed all of the rank 2 tangles. And then we have the Man-at-Arms, who can then allocate maybe a damage, or maybe just get some tanking up again. You could also do Defender sometimes if the Soul Stirs is on someone who's weak and vulnerable. Dodging it is better, but then again, that's not always an option. So 2 more attacks, and we have a crit and buff here, so we get a lot of damage. You need really someone to be the consistent damage, whether that's from dots or whatever it's from. The Waking Dead is the Soul Stirs reaction, 18 damage. That's quite significant. And we need to do the Bellow. I want to do this fight as... oh, we got an extra bonus action. I want to do this fight as controlled as possible. Because it's... Yeah, even though you're close to the end, then they still have Death Blow, and that's a little bit risky. What is that, 11 hit points? Yeah, well, I guess we can just go for that kill, get it to Death Door, and then have it proc the Death Door as many times as possible. So you can see it's a slow and steady fight. It's all about maintaining control instead of just trying to DPS race it. Definitely would not DPS racing this one. Hope that was useful, and you get some good loot as well. Some really useful loot. I really like the trophy you get from this one, particularly. The next boss we're taking a look at is the Librarian of the Sprawl, and here he is.
The conflagration must be stopped. The Librarian must be destroyed.
All right, so he is in the back row, and he is hiding behind some piles of books. The books, he will destroy those gradually. He has 3 actions per round. One of them will be allocated to dealing damage to the books. If he gets to the first row and has destroyed all the books, he will be quite unmanageable. So in this fight, you want to get damage in on the back row. And because you can't really wait until he comes up front, so if you have a team that doesn't have any back row damage, this will be a tough fight. Books can burn, but they can't be blighted or bled, so that means that you can do those kind of things as well. He has a tendency to put dodge tokens on himself, which makes it a little bit difficult, and that's kind of the biggest part. He doesn't have a lot of hit points. Dots are extremely good, obviously not burn, but blight and bleed are extremely good because he has 3 turns actions per turn, so he gets that damage in pretty damn quick. You can see the books are immune to blight, so we'll just throw that in there and get those blighted. He will have those 3 turns. One of them will always be allocated to a book burner. Then he will do 2 attacks on us. Burning Bright is an AoE that hurts like hell with lots of burn. Okay, could be worse. And Categorize is a special attack. It shuffles the party in a specific way. That specific way is according to the name of the characters, so you can know exactly how they're going to be. They're going to be reorganized. So Grey Robber, Highwayman, Man-at-Arms, Plague Doctor, starting from the front to the back in alphabetical order. It's really weird, but some teams will not really be affected. Some teams will be heavily affected. It's something you can try to keep in mind. We are going to waste a crit token for some reason on this. I don't like that these tokens use crit, consume crits. Doesn't matter, we still have another crit token and we can work our way. So the dodge tokens are the main ones. You can do something like, there are a few abilities that prevent enemies from gaining dodge. I don't think they're worth it because those are bad skills generally, so only working for this fight. He will do 15 damage every time. So the first stack books has 1, the second has 2, and the 3 has 3 attacks inbound. So 6 rounds. That's then he will be at the front. So you have to make sure that is your timer until he gets to the front. As he comes closer, probably some more of your characters can do more attacks, since back row is kind of limited. So it's always about sort of figuring out when, where, and what to do the most damage. Maybe you need to buff up until he gets closer. But if you can only hit the first 2 ranks, then this is going to be a very tough fight. So it's worth considering when pairing up a team, or when you're looking at the team, it's very frontline intensive. Then you don't want to go for the Librarian. Also, ironically, well, maybe not ironically, but the way it works is that this zone has good fire equipment, but it's also, the whole zone is immune to fire. He has 3 attacks, and those are basically coming here at the end. We are getting pretty much under control. We're getting lots of blights and a good damage from the Highwayman. And he is now done going here. So he comes up to the 2nd position. He will now lead 3 attacks on the 3rd round. So we can definitely do this in before we get to turn 7. Turn 7 is where difficulties are. If you deal damage to the books, that's not really a big deal as long as you deal less than 15 damage, because he always deals 15 damage to the books. So any damage less than 15, don't worry about it. Any damage at 15 is of course going to be a problem. Here, you can also see I can shoot even though I deal 10 damage to the books. It doesn't matter because it'll still have 35 damage, which is still 3 attacks from him. So just be a little bit careful about it and understand when, what, why. There we go. Now these dodges are just taking out some of our best attacks off, but they will be there. And let's explode him away. He is on death door and should pop any second. There we go. So that is how you take care of the Librarian and harvest his good loot. That's some really good pieces of loot here, and I'm definitely going to go for this one more often in the future. The last boss is the Leviathan of the Shroud, and in my opinion, by far the hardest boss and most technical. Here he is, and there are lots of tokens. The gimmick here is that he will cast he has 155 hit points. You can't move him around. So start dealing some damage here. Ooh, that's a good one. But the gimmick of this fight is that he will target 2 characters, and those will be susceptible to be dragged underwater. And being dragged underwater means that you suddenly have 3 characters, kind of in from DD1 with the put him in the pot. So Eyes of the Storm, here we go. Those are the 2 who will now be susceptible to be picked up. So I can use, in this case, I can use Defender on the 2nd character who is affected, so that I know now that it will always be my tank who will be affected by the claw that comes up. The claw comes up at the end of the round, and it will come in. So Baleful Breath, it'll be attacking one of these. It has 24 hit points. You can resist it if you have good pullback resist, and I do have a very good pullback resist, 120, so I will never be pulled down. How did I get this? Well, there is a poultice you can buy. So if you're going into the Shroud or planning to take the Shroud, then I would highly recommend getting your tank to have a lot of move resist, and then also the Defender like this. Then you completely mitigate this hardest part of this fight. Lovely. It's always one off. 24 hit points. I dealt 23, so that's the way it usually goes. Then we kill this one, and we can then continue with the rest of the team to focus on the boss fight. And he will keep summoning this again and again, and that's kind of the difficult. There's always like these incidental parts here, but the barnacles, the little bit of damage, the stress, the blinds, the vulnerables, all that good stuff. So at this point, it's just focusing on the damage, and then on the 3rd turn, he will be summoning again. So Breath of the Deep. Breath of the Sea is really annoying, just random debuffs every time, and getting debuffs like blind is awful. But you know, we'll have to endure and blind it. So we'll do take aim to remove the blind and also get nice juicy deep buffs. Then he will do the Eyes of the Storm, target 2 people, and we don't want to have our back row, our our Grave Robber to be pulled down. Definitely not. So again, we will make sure that it can only be the tank who will be pulled down. And now at the end of the round and the beginning of the next round, he'll do Deep Rising at the end of the round, and then it'll be pulled down at the start of the next round. So there's not really any good time to respond before. See, he takes the hand takes its turn on the front run. So now it was completely missed, and we could now either go for the boss, because just getting the last 55 hit point down, or we can go for the front. Since the hand doesn't do much, to be honest, because it can't pull down the Man-at-Arms, and that's the only one who can be targeted, then I might as well just focus a little bit on both and just leave the hand up there, because it doesn't really do anything. I mean, it does an attack and stuff, but as you can see, we are now sorting out this boss, and he will do better. But again, trying to pull the other one down, and as long as you have the move resist. So move resist and defender is definitely the trick to this fight. And with those two sorted, you also need, of course, some damage to take care of this this hand. And then we have the boss at 1 hit point, so it should be easy to take care of it. It still has a few tricks up its sleeve trying to put some debuffs on us, but alas, it will not save you. And we will get you to Death Door. And from Death Door, well, the next step is simple. So I hope that was useful in taking care of all of the 4 bosses of each of the regions. If you have enjoyed it, if you like this, please be sure to hit the like button. It helps me a lot. And I hope that you enjoyed it. Check out my Twitch for more Darkest Dungeon regularly. Until next time, take care. And as always, stay effective.